Welcome to day 2 of Passion Week. You know, the first day we talked about what it was like to be in a scene like this, a scene with this pristine garden where God created man and woman and they had free reign to do whatever they want, except for the one thing that they ended up doing, which was eating from that tree. And all of a sudden, at least in our minds, the scene went from this pristine feeling of Eden, this pristine feeling of paradise, and it went to a scene that looked something like this. And so where our scene started in this beautiful garden in a tropical paradise, after the fall, after Adam separates himself from God, we're banished and we're left with this feeling like this, where we're in this scorching desert and we don't know how to feel other than we can already begin to feel the flames of hell that await us for being rebellious to our God and Father, our Creator. What started out in a garden ultimately will end up being finished in a garden. Today I want to talk to you about Holy Week. Would you follow along? So if you didn't know, this coming Sunday is Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday to the world, and in the church we can call it either one. What's important is that we know what it means. For me, Easter is actually more important than Christmas. I know Christmas is where we get the presents and we have the fun, but Easter is about the resurrection. Easter is celebrating the very event that our faith hinges on. If there's no resurrection, there is no Christianity. We just have another religion. We just follow another guy who is zealous at best and misled at worst. But that's not what Easter's about. But leading into Easter, many denominations celebrate this thing called Holy Week. And Holy Week starts on the Sunday before Easter and leads all the way up to Resurrection Sunday, which is this coming Sunday. And so on that Sunday before Easter, we call that Palm Sunday. And if you remember the story, that's where Jesus rode into town. He rode in on this donkey, but he's riding in on this donkey, and people are throwing these palm branches on the ground so that his donkey doesn't walk on regular dirt. And they're saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And they're excited about the possibility of Jesus being their Messiah, Jesus being the one to save them. Remember, on Sunday before Easter, he's being celebrated and loved by everybody. But things are going to change, because after Sunday, we know comes Monday, and Monday Jesus takes some time and he goes to the temple, and when he goes to the temple, he sees people mishandling money. He sees the church leaders taking advantage of people, taking advantage of the poor, and taking advantage of widows, and using the church of God as a place for merchandise, as a place to make a profit. And so Jesus leaves the temple and he takes time and he braids his own whip. That's right, he braids his own whip, and he goes in. He's a man's man. He flips the tables over. He starts whipping the preachers that are in the temple, and he says that my Father's house is supposed to be a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves. After Monday, he goes to the Pharisees on Tuesday, and he rebukes them. Calls them blind leaders of the blind. He says that there are tombs, that they are like caskets. They're nice on the outside, but on the inside they're full of dead men's bones. And so in 2 days, he went from being the most popular person in the town to now he's the least popular person in the town, from whipping people in the temple and then challenging the church leaders. So now we get to what's called Spy Wednesday. And Spy Wednesday is where Judas, who is one of his disciples, breaks off and sneaks away to these very same Pharisees that Jesus was rebuking. And he makes a deal with them. He says, I tell you what, you give me 30 pieces of silver and I will point out Jesus to you when we get to Gethsemane. Now, it's interesting that Jesus needed to be pointed out which means that he looked a lot like the rest of the crowd, that he wasn't a lot different. He didn't glow in the dark, and he was a man. He was all man. And Judas sells out his friend Jesus, but not only does he sell him out, he sells him for 30 pieces of silver, which is the price of a slave. So Jesus is sold for the price of a slave. They make the deal is done, and Judas joins back with the other 11 disciples. And it seems like business as usual, right? It doesn't seem like anybody's really aware of the thing that's going on. And so Wednesday night passes, and when we wake up, it's called Maundy Thursday. Now, Maundy Thursday, some people call it Holy Thursday, but Maundy actually is where we get the word commandment from. Not Monday, Thursday, Maundy Thursday, Maundy. And on Maundy Thursday, Jesus, he has the Last Supper. We take communion, we do the little cracker, we do the grape juice to signify his death, burial, and resurrection, and partaking of his body being broken and his blood being shed. But he's with his disciples, and one of the things he does is he gives them a commandment. This is where we get the name Maundy from. Maundy Thursday, Commandment Thursday. And he washes the feet of one of his disciples, and then another one, and then another one. And he's knelt down on the floor, and he's wrapped himself in a towel, and here he is, the Messiah. He's God. He's the King of Kings. Not only is he using his bare hands to wash feet, these are the hands that he made, and these are the people he made, and he's washing these people that he made with water that he made. Isn't that amazing? And Jesus gives this commandment. He says, as I've loved you, you've got to love one another. The greatest in my kingdom is the one who serves all. And how contrary is that to what we learn about society today? Society today says, hey, you got to get ahead. You got to do you at all costs. You want to be number one. All you want to do is win, win, win. And there's nothing wrong with winning. But Jesus said to be the greatest, you have to be the servant of all. Jesus is also sad at this time because he knows that somebody's going to betray him. He even says as much, and everybody's like, who could it be? Who could it be? Who could it be? And he kind of gave a hint to who it was going to be, but Jesus knew his days were coming to an end. And so he says, let's go out and pray. And they go out, they sing a hymn, they go out in the night, and then they end up in the garden. The garden. Now, I'm not saying this is the Garden of Eden, but it was in a garden that Adam and Eve fell. It was in a garden where they went against and rebelled against God's will. And it is in a garden that Jesus goes to pray to his Father. He collapses in depression. It's what one of the texts actually says, that he felt the depression of being separated. He had anxiety disorder in this moment. And the temptation was there to rebel against the very thing that God sent him to do. He said, God, if there's another way, please let this cup pass from me. The difference between the first garden scenario and the second garden scenario, the book of Romans talks about a lot, the difference between the first Adam and the second Adam. And so Jesus, he's under so much pressure. It is so hard for him to want to obey God's will, that his capillaries in his forehead begin to break, and he begins to not just sweat from the pressure, but he's sweating blood. He's experienced something called hematidrosis. And then in the midst of his prayer, as he gets up, Judas shows up with the Pharisees, and he walks up and kisses Jesus on the cheek, a sign of betrayal. Jesus said, do you betray me with a kiss, Judas? And Jesus is taken into custody, and he's given an illegal trial, and Herod and Pilate kind of have an argument back and forth of who's responsible for Jesus. And the Jews are saying, we're not responsible, this is your responsibility. And he says, I can't find anything wrong, and he sends them back, and this happens for a little bit until finally Pilate doesn't want to be bothered with it anymore. And Pilate tries to get Jesus off the hook, so he sends him to the whipping post. He sends him to have his back scored by this cat of nine tails. by a flagellum. Some of you have taken a class with me and know what this means. It is a leather whip that they would weave beads and glass into, and they would put it across your back, and it would rip your back to shreds. And not only did he get this flagellum, not only did he get this whipping, but they wanted to make fun of him, say, "Oh, you're the king of the Jews?" So they make him this crown, and they make this crown of thorns, and when they set it on his head, it's thorns, it just doesn't fit right. So they take this reed and they smash it over his head. So now his back is torn up, he's got a splitting headache, he's got these thorns digging in past his skull into his brain matter. He's just screaming in agony, and he's losing blood. He's already been losing blood from the pressure he's been under. And at this point, he's been condemned to crucifixion. There was a choice between him and a criminal named Barabbas. And they said, "Give us Barabbas." The very same people on Palm Sunday that was cheering him on was now sending him to the cross. And so now we are in the middle of the day called Good Friday. And it wasn't good for Jesus, but it was good for us. And it was here that they would drive nails into his wrist and nails into his ankle bones. And they would hang him on this cross, but not before they tried to get him to carry it down the Via Dolorosa, down the way of the death. It's about a 3/4 of a mile walk with a 90-pound beam on your back. It's not sanded. It's a rough beam, and it's been put on your back, and you can't even carry it. And so they have Simon carry it for him. But when they get there, they hang him on that cross, and he's alone. He's separated. He's quarantined to that tree, if you will. Remember, it was a tree where the transgression happened. Now it's a tree where the transgression is going to be fixed. And we don't worry, because we know Sunday is coming. But Good Friday is the crucifixion of Jesus. And then there's Dead Saturday, because everything's quiet. Everybody's given up. Everybody's gone to their homes. Everybody's on lockdown. Everybody has lost hope. Much like Adam and Eve probably did when they were banished from the garden. Much like Cain did after he killed Abel. Much like Abraham did after he let down God. Much like David did after he slept with Bathsheba. And so on and so on. It was just years of continuing to let God down, continuing to experience the separation that we talked about already. This self-imposed quarantine from God's mercy that's more contagious than any virus, more contagious than any sin that's out there. And Jesus was ready to put it all on display.